Okay, so my name is Amanda Connors, and I work as a practice advisor and registration coordinator with the Nova Scotia Dietetic Association. I've been with the NSDA for about 5 years, um, and I would be available to answer any registration questions, any questions related to practice, any questions you may have around any ethical decision making, or at least help you try to find an answer to any ethical dilemmas that you may have. I'm also the contact for the Continuing Competency Program. So basically any questions that you may have related to practice, ethics, continuing competency, registration, or renewal, please send those along to me, and I would be happy to help in any way that I can. So for today, we will look at registration with a regulatory body, professional practice competencies, and the CDRE. So the Nova Scotia Dietetic Association is a bit misleading, as an association is generally a word used to describe a body that represents its members. The NSDA is actually representative of the public. So we don't act in the interest of members or registrants, which are the dietitians. We act in the interest of the public. So we're constantly wearing a public protection hat. An association related to dietetics would be Dietitians of Canada. So they are an organization that represents their members, which are dietitians. So because of this, about 10 years ago, a new act went to legislation, went to the legislature to be approved, called the Dietitians Act. So we're just waiting for this act to be proclaimed, and then once it's proclaimed, we will change names from the Nova Scotia Dietetic Association to the Nova Scotia College of Dietitians and Nutritionists. And with this change, we will see some change in scope of practice. Most things will remain the same. We are functioning as a regulatory body now, so that won't change. However, there will be some changes. We will be able to order blood work under the new act in consultation with other healthcare professionals, and we will be able to order, prescribe certain medications and vitamin supplements in consultation with other practitioners. So those are two major changes that we will see once we become a college. But once we do become a college, there will be a lot of communication to members or to registrants to let them know of the changes and when they will take place and what you need to know. But that change is coming. So make sure that you read all communications from the NSDA, especially in regards to this, but please read all communications from the NSDA. So why do I register with a college? You would register with a college, or in our case, the NSDA, to practice as a dietitian. You would also register to use protected titles and for recognition and status with a professional designation. So what is the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian? In Nova Scotia, there is no difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. Both titles are protected in Nova Scotia. This does change from province to province. It depends on the legislation. But in Nova Scotia, only people who are registered with the NSDA can refer to themselves as a dietitian or a nutritionist. Dietitians working in public health and sometimes in private practice may refer to themselves as nutritionists, and that's fine. But anybody who's not registered with the NSDA cannot refer to themselves as a dietitian or as a nutritionist. Some people will refer to themselves as a nutrition consultant, and that's fine. If you're not registered with the NSDA, you can refer to yourselves as a nutrition consultant, as that is not a protected title. And only individuals registered with the NSDA can use those titles. So the protected titles currently in Nova Scotia are PDT, dietitian, professional dietitian, nutritionist, and professional nutritionist. Once we become a college, these will be updated to include RD, or registered dietitian, as well as dietetic intern. So with the college will come the transformation of PDT to RD, which is another, I guess, big change, as a lot of dietitians across Canada and the US and across internationally are referred to as an RD. But we continue to be called a professional dietitian because this is what's included in our current Professional Dietitian Act. So why would I choose a regulated health professional to be my healthcare provider? So as somebody going out to choose a healthcare professional, I would choose a regulated healthcare professional for assurance that they have the required education and training to enter the profession. So that's one of the many things that I do with the NSDA is I review transcripts and internship letter completion letters to ensure that everybody who's entering the profession has the required education and training. And other colleges also do this to ensure that only educated professionals or people with the required education and training are entering the profession. You would gain assurance that they are current and competent in their practice, and every regulated health professional does have a continuing competency program or a professional development program that they have to engage in to maintain membership as a regulated health professional. So you always have the assurance that they are competent in their area of practice when you're going with a regulated health professional. A college promotes good practice and attempts to prevent poor practice. And a college maintains a complaint process where the public and other health professionals can report unsafe, unethical, and incompetent practice. So basically, if you go to a health provider who's not registered with a regulatory body, it's basically a buyer beware. If something happens during that session, and you feel like you've been done wrong or something wasn't right, it's a regulated health professional, you have the opportunity to go to that college and make a complaint. If it's somebody who's not registered with a regulatory body, then it's a buyer beware type of scenario. So you really have no other place to turn. If you go to somebody for back pain and the back pain actually gets worse following it, and it could be debilitating, and they're not regulated, then you really have nowhere to go to make a complaint or to see that that person gets additional training or whatever the case may be in that complaints process. So it's really a good idea to protect yourself and go with regulated health professionals, or at least have the buyer beware attitude when you're going with a non-regulated health professional. So some Nova Scotia Dietetic Association key responsibilities include registration, continuing competency program. We set standards and guidelines for practice. So we currently have a code of ethics, documentation guidelines. We have a social media position statement. We have a position statement on the sale and endorsement of products, among many others. And these can be found on our website. You go to dietitians, and then there's a drop-down menu, and you go to publications, and there you will find all our standards and guidelines. And every dietitian, it is understood that all dietitians are aware of all these policies and guidelines, and that they adhere to them in their daily practice. You will also see these standards. There's going to be questions about these standards related to these standards in the jurisprudence e-learning module. Once you are registered, you are required to complete this every 5 years. You have to get 100% on this e-learning module However, you have unlimited attempts to get that 100%. And we don't look at how many attempts it takes, just that it's completed and that all modules are completed with 100%. And then also the NSDA addresses any public complaints regarding dietitians' practice. So the NSDA's mission is in the public interest. NSDA regulates licensed dietitians and nutritionists to practice in a safe, ethical, and competent manner. So we do this through our competencies for entry to the profession, through standards of practice, the code of ethics, bylaws, which are created based on the Act, and then we have policies, complaints process, and the continuing competency program. So our continuing competency program is made up of competency goals. So we ask that every dietitian create 2 competency goals per year. So 2 goals focused on learning, that they complete a learning log with learning activities related to each goal, as well as learning activities that are not related to either goal. So to ensure that you have 3 categories of learning. We also ask that you have a professional portfolio that's kept up to date. And the professional portfolio outline can be found in the toolkit that's online under dietitians and competency program. And then also the jurisprudence e-learning module is part of our continuing competency program. So this is what it looks like. It is something that is completed online. You log in with your username and password, and in there you'll see learning log. You go into that, and this is where you can complete these. So your 2 learning goals, goal 1 and 2, you have your date, and then you do the learning activity. So in this case, they read an article, participated in Dietitians of Canada Learning on Demand, and reviewed a NSDA video. This is just a snapshot of someone's learning log. We would expect that you include more learning activities than this in your annual learning log. These are just 3 examples. So the first one's related to goal 1, second to goal 2, and the third to goal to other, sorry. And then your learning outcome, you should basically explain how you incorporated new learning into practice. So what the impact of that new learning was on your current practice. Did you improve a certain skill that you're now completing with clients? So what was that impact that you had on practice? Please include that in the learning outcome. That's where the bulk of the points are, because that's where we're seeing, that's the explanation of competence right there in that learning outcome. So that's why the weight of the program is on learning outcomes, because this is where you would, where we would see increase in knowledge, skills, and competence. Does anybody have any questions so far? So an example of a competency goal is, in the next year, I will increase my understanding of. So I will increase my understanding of texture modification diets. I will increase my knowledge of the various fast-acting insulins. I will increase my knowledge of mentorship skills. It's really anything within the dietetic scope of practice. However, if you do have a job, it is within your area of practice. So once you come out of school, if you get a job right away, we would like you to hone in on your area of practice to complete your competency program and your competency goals. If you are still looking for work, you can pick an area of nutrition where you would like to go into, or a general area. But it's good to have specific learning goals, whatever the case may be, to make sure they're specific and that you can achieve them within a year, which is the length of the program. So you're asked to submit these learning logs annually right before renewal, which is March 31st. So once we become a college, will also have an active practice license. And that means that you would need to practice 500 hours in 3 years. At least that's what the goal is right now. It is still a draft policy, and it will come into effect once we're at college. But right now, it's looking like it may be 500 hours in 3 years. If you're a permanent full-time employee working as a dietitian full-time, that will be no problem. If you are part-time, it's still generally not a concern to get the 500 hours in 3 years. However, you will need to keep a log, possibly keep a log of those, identifying where you're getting the 500 hours from. If you're at a school, you have the 3 years to come up with the 500 hours, and you wouldn't have to report until after the 3rd year. If you cannot get 500 hours and you're not currently working as a dietitian, you can go on a non-active roster once we're at college. We do not have that right now, but once we become a college, this will be an option. And there will be, you can switch from non-active to active roster. However, you may have to do some upgrading or some mentorship or something along those lines if you've been out of practice for a while. So everybody's very aware with the integrated competencies for dietetic education and practice if you're coming off internship and just entering the profession. So within these competencies, there are some to adhere to regulatory requirements. So 1.02, sorry, comply with regulatory requirements relevant to dietetic practice. And then C in that competency says demonstrate knowledge of regulatory scope of practice, standards of practice, and code of ethics. So it is a dietitian's responsibility to be aware and knowledgeable of all the standards that help guide practice. That could be any of the standards that we have on our website, as well as any of the acts that are pertaining to your area of practice. So in a hospital setting or a long-term care setting, that would include TIA, which is the Health Information Act. You have to be aware of that. Maybe if you're working in a hospital, the Hospital Act. If you're working in long-term care, the Home for Special Care Act. There's many acts that you will need to become aware of, and make sure that you review them. Make sure you know what their content is as it pertains to dietetics. And the Jurisprudency Learning module does cover a lot of this, and we have a lot of the links and such, and it's all within the handbook, which can be found on our website as well. So to review that handbook would be a really great tool. So the NSDA, the Nova Scotia Dietetic Association, as well as once we become a college, we are self-regulated. So what self-regulation means is that the board of directors for the NSDA and all committees are composed of dietitians, as well as myself and Jennifer, we are the staff at the NSDA, and we are both dietitians as well. And this is a true privilege to be regulated by dietitians. Jennifer and I are and the board and the committees are very aware that we are dietitians, but we are standing up for the public's interest. So Jennifer and I are constantly putting our public protection hat on as opposed to our dietitian hat. But it's great to have a working level of knowledge of the scope of practice of dietitians to be able to help regulate dietitians. So we are in a unique position where we are members of the profession, but we are working in the public's interest. But we really strive to do this job to the best of our abilities with our public protection hat on. And then once you're in practice, dietitians self-regulate themselves in their practice area. So it's we expect that dietitians only perform what they are qualified to do and what's within the dietetic scope of practice. There are going to be scopes overlapping between physio, OT, nursing, and dietitians. Like there are overlaps in scope, However, we hope that dietitians only carry out what's within our scope of practice. And we expect that. And if that's not the case, we hope to hear to help correct that. And so that's where dietitians self-regulate themselves, is that if there is something that's but they're not qualified to do but is within our scope of practice, a dietitian has to be aware that they lack the knowledge and skills to perform that task, and that they will need to go and increase that knowledge and skill before they carry out the task that's been asked, or that they refuse the task. But they cannot, we expect that dietitians do not carry out a task that they are not knowledgeable in. Yeah. So scope of practice is written in provincial legislation. It's what we do and what others don't. The roles, functions, and accountabilities that dietitians are educated and authorized to perform. And the college must ensure that members are practicing within their individual scope of practice. Okay, so I think we touched on that a little bit in the last slide. But just to make sure that you have the knowledge, skills to perform any tasks that are asked of you before you complete them, and to make sure that they're within our scope of practice. And if you have any questions about scope of practice, please look at the legislation, and also you can contact me. And I will definitely get back to you regarding the answer to your question around scope. So this is a visual of scope of practice. So the big blue circle is the professional scope of practice. The green is your individual scope of practice when you come out of school. When you're done internship, you have a very large scope of practice. Once you get your first job, whether it's in diabetes, long-term care, working in intensive care, wherever the case may be, your scope of practice is going to go from the green down to that small blue circle. So you're going to really increase your knowledge and skill in that one small area of practice, but your scope is going to narrow around that. But you're going to become an expert in that area. If you decide to transfer to another job, that's fine. You just have to make sure you've increased your knowledge and skill in that new area of practice before you start working your first day in that area. So we just explained that. So that's that individual scope is narrowing around the employment scope of practice. So we regulate scope through policies, standards, and guidelines. And again, they can all be found on our website under dietitians and then publications. And the one that we want you to pay particular attention to is the Code of Ethics. You're expected to carry out all your duties as a dietitian with the Code of Ethics in mind, and to not go against anything that's written in the Code of Ethics. So the Code of Ethics clearly defines dietitians' ethical responsibilities and what types of behaviors would lead to disciplinary action. So if you haven't already reviewed the Code of Ethics, please go on our website and print off a copy if you have that ability, and to keep it with you when you're in practice. There will be a lot of ethical, depending on your area of practice, you have the potential to have a lot of ethical dilemmas coming your way. The first place to look when you have an ethical dilemma is the Code of Ethics. And then if you're not finding your answer there, you can move forward from there to the other standards. But this is a really good place to start. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the CDRE. None of this information is new. It's all in the prep guide and the online tutorial. However, we just thought we would outline some of the information via webinar in case some of it may have been missed. I will be referring to my notes for this section, as I did take a few notes of things that I want to make sure I say to help to give you the best possible overview. But we will be looking at what to expect and how to prepare. So there is an online tutorial available. So it demonstrates how you would navigate the computer screen, how you navigate the point and click, and how you answer the questions. I did go into I do have the link. If you are looking for the link, it should be in the information that you've been sent. If it's not, if you don't have it yet, please email me. I will share the link with you. And it's just kind of to get you comfortable with what you're going to see when you arrive at the exam, and the point click. None of the questions are relevant or related to the actual exam content. But it's good to kind of get comfortable with what you're going to see on the screen when you arrive. So it is a computer-based exam. It has 185 multiple choice questions. So a quarter will be case-based. So basically, you're going to get a scenario, and then it's going to have 4 to 6 questions following that scenario, based on that one scenario. And then also the rest of the roughly 75% of the questions will be independent questions. So they will not be based on a case study or a scenario. So what is confident practice? You need to have a knowledge base of nutrition, but the majority of the exam is based on not what you know, not just what you know. Some is based on knowledge-based questions. However, a lot of it is what you do with what you know, which is what competence is. It's not necessarily the knowledge that you have, but how you are going to take that knowledge and put it into practice. And the critical thinking and the application. So really to gain an understanding around critical thinking, it is based on all the competencies that you've dealt with through your internship. So to really be familiar with those competencies, and how to apply those competencies, and think critically about the questions. So about 20% would be on basic knowledge, and 80% will either test application or critical thinking. So the application is to apply knowledge to new practical situations, and critical thinking is the ability to judge relevance of data, deal with, and problem solve. So again, the integrated competencies for dietetic education and practice is great for studying. It looks at professional practice, communication and collaboration, nutrition care, communication and population health, and management. So you will see questions from all areas of dietetic practice. However, it's not the area or the setting. It's generally the application of knowledge and the critical thinking that they're trying to test. It's not the practice setting. So to really try to separate it away, and really look at application of knowledge and critical thinking. So yes, the competencies for entry-level dietitians is your best resource for preparing for the exam. So to be very familiar with the various competencies, and how you can, just be aware of the competencies going into the exam. This will help you identify what's being tested when you're going through the exam. So questions on the exam will test your ability to perform the 6 skill sets in the entry-level competencies, which are assessment, which involves gathering all the relevant information and interpreting that information to develop conclusions. Planning, which involves determining goals and objectives to address the concerns that you have identified in your assessment. Implementation, which is taking the appropriate steps to put your plan into action, and evaluation, which includes examining the effectiveness of your process and appraising whether your plan has achieved the desired outcomes. Professional practice and communication are both competencies that must be demonstrated throughout a dietitian's practice. And then there's also an example in the prep guide. If you want a link to the prep guide, if you're not familiar with this, please email me. I do have a link that I can share with you. Okay, so once you arrive at the exam, it's expected that you are quiet. No snacks unless you have a special accommodation. No calculators, no cell phones. You are allowed to have a water in a clear bottle with no label, and labels may cause a distraction. So you can have a clear water bottle, but nothing else, no food or liquids other than that. You can have a special accommodation for food or liquid based on a medical need, but you have to apply for this. So if that's something that you are requiring, please email Jennifer, and she can make sure that accommodation is reviewed. And beware of what might distract you. If you were to sit, if where you sit makes a difference, get there early enough to choose an appropriate seat. So if you'd like to be by the window, by the door, in the back, in the front, if that preference is important to you, make sure you're there early, because that may help you stay calm throughout the exam and to do the best that you feel you can do. Also, to minimize other distractions, so try not to wear any jewelry or any loud jewelry. A big jacket, winter jackets, should not be brought into the exam room. So if you are wearing a winter jacket, to keep it in your car or to store it before you go into the exam room. So how to prepare. Everybody is different. I may need a full night's sleep, whereas you know, the person next to me may have wanted to study all evening and then get up super early and start studying again and reviewing materials. You know how you study, so to do whatever makes you comfortable. Make sure you leave early to ensure you're there on time. So that will eliminate the stress of possibly being late for the exam. So whatever makes you feel the most confident in taking the exam, do that as you prepare and lead up to it. Make sure you know where you're going before you leave as well. So the purpose of this exam is to determine whether you're minimally competent to enter the dietetic profession and to practice as a dietitian. It will test your ability to perform the entry-level competencies to the profession. It's not designed to measure how confident you are, just that you meet the minimum standard. So once you write the exam, you will get exam results as a pass or a fail. You won't actually get your final exam mark. It just comes to you as you've passed or you've failed. Hopefully that you've passed. And let's think positive thoughts that it is that you've passed. And then if you are unsuccessful in this first attempt, we do encourage you to make an appointment with Jennifer and to meet to review anything that you've felt may have caused you some stress, or anything that you were unsure of. And this will help you prepare for the next time you write the exam. And also, if you're unsuccessful in the exam, you can apply to become a temporary member again. So if you're unsuccessful, you are no longer a temporary member. You can still write the exam the next time, not being a temporary member. If you are looking to work as a dietitian, you can reapply to be a temporary member. That's all done with Jennifer Garris, or Hemian. She's recently changed her name, so please contact Jennifer if that is the case for you. But for now, let's just think positive thoughts, and that won't have to be the case. And just try to relax, prepare, and just feel comfortable in writing that exam. So that's basically all I have. If you have any questions regarding the exam, if you would like me to send you the prep guide or the link to testing the site, please let me know. I will email that off to you. I am recording this, so I will be sending the recording to everybody in case you would like to review it again. Again, none of the information that I've shared with you is anything different than what is shared on the exam website or anything that's been emailed to you. However, it is a different format, so depending on the type of learner you are, this may have helped.